Cuentos del Abuelito. Hey guys, how's it going? On this occasion, I'll be narrating a few scary stories that happened during Halloween. A big shout out to A Hawaiian Shirt for giving me the okay to narrate his stories. He is the author of the stories I chose to narrate this time. I'll leave his information down below in the description box. If you enjoy reading a good scary story, go ahead and check them out. Remember, if you like the stories, leave a like and a comment for support and all that type of thing. With all that being said, let's get to it. Story number 1. Running. Jacob twisted the key, locking up the theater for the night. The theater was old and dingy, but just closed on a fairly successful marathon of classic slasher films for Halloween. Every customer and employee alike were gone, leaving him with a dark theater and an even darker parking lot. He was used to locking up at night, but it always gave him chills, like someone was watching. He headed to his car, the only vehicle in the parking lot. He was halfway to it when he heard a noise, a sound coming from behind him. Someone was looking at the posters on the front of the building. The film's coming soon. He had his head tilted to the side like he didn't know what he was looking at. He was dragging something down the plastic frame of the pictures, but whatever it was, Jacob couldn't see. "Hey buddy, we're closed for the night," he yelled, feeling uneasy with the loiter. Maybe he was drunk or perhaps lost. Jacob stopped a few feet away from his car. "Hey man, you hear what I said? We're closed. You gotta get out of here," he said. And suddenly the man turned. Jacob felt a stab of fear like ice in his veins. The man's bottom jaw was missing, the horrible mass that was his tongue swaying as he turned. His nose and eyes were also gone, bloody pits residing in their place. He held up a hatchet, its blade catching the light. That was when he started running. Jacob panicked and bolted for his car, fumbling for his keys in terror. The sounds of shoes hitting the pavement echoed behind him, and he couldn't help but fanatically look in the direction of his pursuer. The man's tongue wagged as he ran straight at him, closing the distance with an alarming speed. Jacob looked away and focused on the keys. The footsteps closed in, and he could hear the moaning now, a pained groan of a man without a jaw. Jacob unlocked the door and scrambled in, thrusting the key in the ignition and starting the car. The man hit the passenger side with a loud thud, his horrible face pressed against the glass. Jacob floored it and peeled out of the empty parking lot, leaving the running man behind. As he drove away, he watched the man chase him, running as fast as he could. He watched him get smaller and smaller until he was gone. He sped all the way home, pulling into the driveway. The face print of blood and drool on the window served as a reminder of the close call. Jacob killed the engine and walked to his front door. He paused a few inches from his doorknob when he heard something. Pounding footsteps. He looked down the street into the darkness past the lampposts. It looked like someone was running. Story number 2. The sheepdog. I go all out on Halloween. Every year, mid-September, I scout the decorations of every superstore and annual spooky shop alike, in search of the latest and greatest decorations for the holiday season. I spend weeks transforming my house into an icon for Halloween, so people from all over town and even the town over can drive down the block with their families, eyes wide at my collection of decorations. Lights, inflatables, fog, and creepy music. There's an abandoned house on my street, and a few others don't decorate, so I like to go the extra mile. We set up a security camera on the doorstep to document all the costumes and call out the best on social media. It's a hit every year. I've seen masks, makeup, and costumes of all kinds. However, I saw something last night that makes me question if I will ever decorate my house again. We were in the final throes of trick-or-treating. There was only a handful of kids left. My husband and daughter had returned from their very own route while I passed out candy. They were now sorting through her haul on the living room floor. I was trying to empty my bowl so I could end the night. I could see the last of the kids down the road, the only two that hadn't come to my house yet. Two animatronics walking together, followed by a skeleton teenager who looked too old to be door to door. After awing at my spectacle, they came my way, pointing at my hanging skeletons and creepy window decorations. They held out their bags with toothy grins, and I loaded the kids up with everything I had. I reminded them to avoid all fresh food and open packages, and pointed to the camera so they could pose. They thanked me and skipped away, with the teenager saying something rude as they passed. When the skeleton teenager arrived, I showed him my empty bowl, and he said some words I'd rather not say. I shrugged them off. "Better luck next year," I said, as he followed the boys while giving me the finger. As they left, I saw a figure across the street, standing in the artificial fog. It looked like a kid in a fuzzy costume, although what exactly, I couldn't see. I smiled and waved him over, pulling an unopened bag from behind the door. He just stood there for a while, and I invited him over by opening the bag. He shivered and crossed the street. He moved slowly, creeping inches at a time. I couldn't tell who the costume was concealing, but I was patient with him. It looked like there was something wrong with his legs, the way they shuffled, and the mask made him look straight ahead. When I got a better look at what he was wearing, I was impressed and unsettled at the same time. The kid was dressed as a sheepdog, but the costume looked very old. It was dirty, but I couldn't deny how good it looked otherwise, like it had been pulled straight from the TV set in the 90s. "Oh my gosh, I love your costume. Did your parents get that for you?" I asked, motioning for him to come closer. I had a handful of candy ready for him. The sheepdog stood frozen. He just stared. "What are you supposed to be this year, A puppy?" I asked cheerfully, keeping the awareness at bay. He was looking past me inside the house. I shook the handful of candy to get his attention. "Don't say much, do you?" "That's alright. Happy Halloween," I said. He stayed put, but held out a crumbled paper bag. Closer now, I could see the dirt in the fur of his costume, and there was a smell, an awful, piercing stench. I pushed it off, thinking maybe the kid was going through a tough time at home. As I filled the kid's bag, I looked into his eyes, which were now very sharp and staring up at me. "Are you alone?" he said, but the voice wasn't like a child's. It was deep and raspy, like an old man. I jumped, but tried to play it off. "What's that, hon?" I said, leaning closer as goosebumps covered my skin. "Who's in there?" he said, his deep groan of a voice giving me chills. His large eyes looked past me again, then back at me. This was a prank. It had to be. But the way it talked, the way it wheezed, it was too real to replicate. "Excuse me?" I stiffened and backed away, blocking his view behind the mask. Around the eyes, it was dark red, like if there was no skin. "Are you scared?" he asked. I called for my husband. "You should be going," I said. Down the road, I saw porch lights go out. I decided it was time to do the same. "Why? I'll have to come back." There was a beastly groan behind the mask. "Have a good night." I shut the door and killed the lights. I waited a moment before looking out. The sheepdog was nowhere to be seen. My husband walked up, mouth full of candy, asking what I wanted. I wanted to explain but shrugged and brushed it off. The next morning I checked the tapes. Everything was fine until the sheepdog kid. It was all distorted and grainy, barely able to make out my altercation with him. But as the night went on, after I went inside, the kid blinked in and out of view, hourly through the night. Every time he would just stand there silently, eyes closed on the camera for minutes at a time. And the weird thing is, I can still smell the rot on the front porch. Story number 3. Take 1. It happens the same every year. All the houses in the neighborhood don their yards with skeletons and spooky lighting, carved pumpkins, paper cutouts of bats. They dress the properties with just as much enthusiasm as the kids and their costumes, all for the purpose of basking in the spirit of Halloween. The house 2 doors down always goes all out. Strobes, inflatables, artificial fog, the whole 9 yards. It attracts kids from all across town, serving as some kind of meeting point for the trick-or-treaters. With pillowcases slung over their shoulders and plastic jack-o'-lanterns in their hands, they start their proud march, every princess and zombie trying to get the biggest haul of their life. Every year I turn off the lights and pretend I'm not home, sitting in the front of the TV with my dog for the annual marathon of slasher films. I'm a bit of a Scrooge. This time of year, I don't really decorate my house. I don't even pass out candy. The street bustles with the combination of laughter and screams, each child and teenager trying to make each year more memorable than the last. From the darkness of my home, I catch a glimpse from the window on the commercial breaks. Everything seems festive and normal, all except the house across the street. I didn't notice it at first. The house across the street is abandoned. It was a modest loft house before it went unkept, with a little garage and big stretch of a porch to walk up before you hit the front door. There's a rocking chair on the side of the door and a window on the other. I imagine it would have been a nice setup back in the day, a nice fall day, you know, sip some coffee on the covered porch in the rocker, hearing the television from the open window. Now the windows are boarded up, the garage door sits lopsided on its hinges, and there's so many old twigs and leaves matted on the porch. It looks like it'll cave at any second. The rocking chair sits empty, dust and mold collecting over the years. No one's lived there for a long time. I don't even think it's on the market. It's old, weathered itself all year round, and everything seems fine. But as trick-or-treating comes to a close, that changes. I have it narrowed down to the last 20 minutes. Every year from 5 to 7, the kids go up and down the street, raising hell, hopped up on sugar and the Halloween spirit. The old house stays dark and quiet almost the whole time, but at 6:40, that porch light kicks on. In the flickering light, a little orange bull appears in front of the door. A few feet away, the rocking chair is no longer empty. There's a clown sitting there. His get-up is crude and old, like an alcoholic uncle threw on a cheap costume one-piece. The eyes are closed, but the eyelids are painted, cartoonish eyes staring at you while it sits perfectly still. A rusty kitchen knife held in a frozen hand, a little paper sign is stuck to the door, and in big letters it reads, "Take 1." I've never seen anybody physically set it up, it's just there. 1 minute it's dark, and the next the light is on. It's almost like someone ran up when you weren't looking and popped the stuff up as a gag. But I've never caught anybody, never seen anybody in the act. It just happens. The thing is, that little orange bowl, it's loaded to the top. Not with dollar store candy either. I'm talking king-size bars. The first time I thought maybe the property owner was trying to give back for having such an eyesore year-round. Or maybe a homeless guy was trying to have a little fun, scare the kids, you know, that sort of thing. But it shows up every year, and it's exactly the same every time. The same scuzzy clown, the same candy bowl, and the same written sign. The most unsettling thing though is the window by the door. All year, the windows in the house are boarded up, but when that light kicks on, those windows open. No boards, no nothing. The faded drapes on the inside sway in the night breeze, but that's all you can see. It's pitch black when you look in there. There's just that damn clown with his painted eyelids and the open window. People started to go missing. Articles in the paper would show the next day. Some kid or teenager wouldn't make it back home after going door to door looking for candy. Every year without fail, there would be a new face to look out for. I would think of the house across the street immediately, but the strange thing is I seem to be the only one to see it. The porch light, the clown, and the bowl of bars. I talked to some of the neighbors and everyone thinks I'm crazy. It got to the point to where I called the police and I was sure they'd kick down the door, find the body or at least some evidence, maybe bones or clothing, something. I called them twice. Twice they came out and they searched the whole damn house. They found nothing. Absolutely nothing. No human remains, murder weapon, not even footprints. Like nobody has been there in ages. They tell me next time I cry wolf, I'll get a ticket. This year at 6:40, I watch the window. The light kicks on and they're there. Clown bowl, paper sign, and open window. I see some kids coming down the street, both dressed as animatronics. They look tired and ready to go, but they see the light. They go to the door and they see those giant bars. They jump with excitement. They read the sign. They look at the clown and they wait for the jump scare. But he just sits there with the knife, held limp and blank painted stare. Each of them pick one out, but there's a long pause, like if they're thinking of getting another. It seems like their conscience got the better of them and they only take one. Heading off the porch, they pass a teen in a hoodie and skull face paint. He pushes past rudely, almost knocking over one of the kids. They seem upset, but they don't look back. They don't notice the clown behind them. The painted lids raise, revealing staring bloodshot eyes. So this year, I decided to pass out candy and turned on my lights. I'm out with my own bowl, waving the kids over, waving them to safety. The eyes on the clown look at me piercingly, like a warning, but it doesn't last long. The teenager with the face paint is stuffing his pockets with the candy bars, as many as he can hold. I show the kids my bowl of suckers, and I tell them the haul's over, to take as much as they want. They're ecstatic, too happy and focused to look back at the slowly standing clown. As the teenager with the face paint gets ready to step down from the porch, skeletal arms shoot through the open window and grabs his arm, the other planting a hand over his mouth to silence. The clown is there in an instant, eyes wild, the knife digging deep, stabbing him over and over. The kids take a handful after handful. I show them the silly paint I put on, and if I have to, I'll ask them about their costumes. The teenager fights, but it's over as soon as it started. The clown stabs and rips the old blade into him. The arms are already pulling him inside. His screams blend with others in the distance. My eyes tear up and the kids get worried. I dump the candy in their bags, trying to stay joyous. My hands are shaking, but I play it off. I call my dog to the front door so they can see the silly spider costume I made him wear. Their laughter drones out what they don't want to hear. The clown grabs the teenager by the ankles and helps the skeletal arms, pushing him into the dark, abandoned house. He leaves the knife sticking from the torso. When the feet are sucked in, he slams the window shut. For a moment, he looks at me. His stare is cold and terrifying, but I don't look long. Across the street, the porch lights shut off, and it's all gone. I still feel the eyes on me, but there's nothing there. Other houses seem to take it as a cue, and one by one, trick-or-treating comes to an end. The kids grin with their heavy bags and wave goodbye, going back the way they came. I'm left at the front door, and the air is suddenly chillier. I look at the porch ahead, and I almost swear I can see him still sitting there in the dark. But when a car passes, the headlights show an empty chair. I take my empty bowl and shoo my dog inside, realizing I'll either have to do this again or move. I have some time to figure it out. Happy Halloween. Until next year. Who's in there? Are you scared? I'll have to come back.